Have you ever noticed that strange, tight feeling in your chest? When a web page takes just 3 seconds too long to load, or when you see those three little dots bubbling on a screen, signaling a reply that hasn't arrived yet. And for a brief moment, the silence feels almost unbearable. It's a quiet question, but one that seems to hang over so much of modern life. Why does waiting, even for the smallest things, feel harder than it ever has before? Welcome, it's good to have you here. If you have felt that low-level hum of restlessness, that subtle itch to fill every empty second with something, anything, just to avoid the pause, you are certainly not alone. It is a feeling that many people describe, a sense that the gears of the world have sped up so much, that our own internal rhythm feels out of sync when things slow down. It's easy to look at this restlessness and think something has gone wrong with us, that perhaps our attention spans have shattered, or that we have simply forgotten how to be still. But maybe the story is a little more complex and a little more forgiving than that. It's possible that patience didn't just disappear overnight, and it's likely not a flaw in your character. Instead, it might be that patience simply lost its place in the world, slowly, quietly, without us really noticing it was leaving. To understand where this feeling comes from, it helps to reflect on what waiting used to look like. Not so long ago, there was a time when waiting wasn't a choice, it was the default setting of existence. If you wanted to see a photograph you had taken, you waited for the film to be developed, a process that took days. If you ordered something from a catalog, you waited weeks for it to arrive. If you missed a phone call, you simply didn't know who called until you returned home. The gap between wanting something and having it was wide, and inside that gap lived a specific kind of human experience. It was a space filled with uncertainty, yes, but also with anticipation, with daydreaming, and often with just plain boredom. And while we rarely look back on boredom with fondness, many people are starting to realize that those empty, friction-filled moments served a purpose. They were the pauses between the notes that made the music intelligible. But slowly, steadily, we began to build a world designed to eliminate those pauses. We smoothed out the friction, we collapsed the timeline. Today, the gap between desire and fulfillment has shrunk to almost nothing. If you want to know a fact, the answer is in your hand in seconds. If you want to watch a movie, it starts now. If you want to speak to someone, they are there. This is, in many ways, a miracle of convenience. And few of us would truly want to go back to the way things were. However, this shift has created a strange psychological side effect. Because we rarely have to wait, we have lost the muscle memory for how to wait. It can feel like our tolerance for the passage of time has thinned, not because we are weaker, but because the environment no longer requires us to be strong in that specific way. Think about the last time you stood in a line at a grocery store or waited for an elevator. For many people, the immediate, almost reflex reaction is to reach for a phone. It's not necessarily because there is something urgent to check. It's often just a way to bypass the waiting. We have become incredibly efficient at editing out the boring parts of life. We can fast forward through commercials, scroll past the dull parts of a video, and fill the 5 minutes before a meeting with a quick dopamine hit from social media. And this is where waiting changed. It transformed from a natural, unavoidable part of life into something that feels like a malfunction. When the world is generally instant, a delay of even a minute feels like a glitch in the system. Something that shouldn't be happening. It's interesting to observe how this changes our relationship with the future. When we had to wait for things, we spent a lot of time imagining them. The anticipation of an event often held as much emotional weight as the event itself. The week leading up to a vacation, the days before a package arrived, the hours before a date. That time was active, it was filled with projection and imagination. Now, because the future arrives so quickly, we sometimes skip the anticipation entirely. We get the thing we wanted, but we miss out on the longing for it. Some people describe this as a feeling of flatness, a sense that even though we have access to everything we want, the satisfaction of getting it feels thinner, less resonant. It's as if by removing the hunger, the meal became less satisfying. This isn't to say that waiting was fun, it was often frustrating and anxious. But it did give things a certain weight. It gave life a texture that is sometimes missing in a frictionless world. And this brings us to a more subtle realization about what impatience really is. We often judge ourselves for being impatient, thinking we should be more zen, more calm, more able to sit in silence. But if you look at it closely, impatience is really just a mismatch between your expectations and your reality. When you expect things to be instant, because they usually are, anything less than instant feels like a failure. It's not that you are incapable of patience, it's that your brain has adapted to a world of speed. You are optimized for the environment you live in. So when that environment suddenly slows down, when the traffic stops or the internet cuts out, it feels jarring. It can feel like being on a high-speed train that slams on the brakes. The momentum throws you forward. That physical sensation of agitation, the foot tapping, the jaw clenching, that is just your internal momentum crashing into a stationary moment. It's a very human reaction to a very modern condition. Another aspect that many people notice is how this constant speed affects our ability to tolerate uncertainty. Waiting is, at its core, a form of uncertainty. When you send a text and don't get a reply, you are in a state of not knowing. When you apply for a job and wait for the call, you are in a state of not knowing. In the past, because communication and processes were slower, we had to build up a tolerance for that not knowing. We had to sit with the question mark. Today, because we can track our packages on a map, see when our messages are read, and get instant feedback on our posts, the state of uncertainty has become rare, and therefore much more uncomfortable. When we are forced into the unknown, even for a short time, it can trigger a disproportionate amount of anxiety. We have come to equate waiting with something is wrong. If the reply doesn't come in 5 minutes, we assume the worst. If the page doesn't load, we assume it's broken. We have lost the easy confidence that things take time. This is where impatience quietly took something from us. It took away our ability to trust the unfolding of time. We have begun to view time as an obstacle to be overcome, rather than the medium in which life happens. We try to hack it, optimize it, shorten it, and fill it. We treat time like a container that must be packed to the brim, and any empty space in that container feels like waste. But perhaps those empty spaces were never waste at all. Perhaps they were the breathing room. It is increasingly felt that the exhaustion many people experience isn't just from doing too much work, but from processing too much input without any pauses. The moments of waiting, the bus ride, the walk to the mailbox, the staring out the window. Those were the moments when the brain could catch up with itself. They were the defragging periods. Without them, we are in a constant state of intake, constant stimulation, without the necessary downtime to integrate what we've experienced. It's why you might find yourself feeling drained even after spending an hour. Just sitting on the couch scrolling, you weren't truly resting, you were processing. You were bypassing the wait, but you were also bypassing the rest. So where does this leave us? It is unlikely that the world will slow down. The technology will get faster, the convenience will increase, and the friction will continue to be removed. But simply noticing this dynamic can be a relief in itself. It allows us to stop blaming ourselves for feeling restless. It allows us to understand that our impatience is a completely normal adaptation to a high-speed environment. And once we stop fighting the feeling, we can start to get curious about it. We can start to notice those moments when we reach for the phone to kill the wait, and just observe the impulse without judgment. We can notice how uncomfortable the silence feels, and just let it be uncomfortable for a moment. It's not about forcing yourself to be patient or trying to return to a slower past. That no longer exists. It's just about recognizing that waiting is not the enemy. It is not dead time, it is simply time. It is the space where we exist between the doing and the having. Some people find that when they stop trying to rush through the waiting, the texture of life begins to return. The anticipation comes back. The small details of the room you are standing in become visible again. The thoughts that were drowned out by the noise have a chance to surface. It's a quiet reclamation of the now, not as a bridge to get to the future, but as a place to be. We often think of patience as a virtue, something we have to strive for, a heavy rock we have to carry up a hill. But maybe patience isn't about effort at all. Maybe patience is just what remains when we stop fighting the pace of things. It is the absence of resistance. It is the realization that the loading bar will fill when it fills, the reply will come when it comes. And the moment you are in right now is valid, even if nothing is happening in it. As we move through a world that demands instant results, Perhaps the most radical thing we can do is to occasionally let ourselves wait. Not because we have to, but because we are remembering how to be human in the gaps. Patience didn't die, it simply stopped being required. But just because we don't need it to survive anymore, doesn't mean we don't need it to feel alive. It is still there, waiting for us to notice it again. Quietly sitting in the pause between one heartbeat and the next. Thank you for spending this time here, for slowing down enough to listen. If this reflection resonated with you, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for being here.